This video is sponsored by Squarespace. This could genuinely be the most insane build we've ever done on this channel because you guys will literally not shut up about this chassis. I'm literally seeing it everywhere. This is the Hyte, as in hype, but Hyte Y60, and it comes in a range of colors. And actually, I think this could be one of the most innovative cases I've seen in a long time. At face value, it doesn't look particularly crazy. I mean, it's very good looking, but it's only when you go a little bit under the skin do you start to see that this is actually a case for the future. And as we're going to see throughout this build, I'm incredibly excited about everything that it offers, because if you're after a more futuristic, very modern thinking case, this could definitely be the chassis for you. And because this is such a heighted up case, it definitely deserves some stupidly high-end components. So we've got things like an RX 6800 XT, DDR5 memory, Z690, i9-12900K, custom cables, custom fans, and even some of these crystal things. So let's get our build on, shall we? And right off the bat, you'll notice something a little bit different about this chassis. It's freaking red! But this is actually not afraid to have a bit of personality. It does come in a range of colors, so you can get this in black and white, I believe, if you do want to go down that route. You might firstly be thinking that it looks very cool, but there isn't fantastic airflow. But you'd be dead wrong, because what they've done is to almost think about PC building slightly differently. So yes, you can see all of your components with glass. I love this little like curved but not curved edge that you've got on the front. But when you turn this thing round to the other side, you'll notice that you have loads of ventilation here, but the party really gets started when you start thinking about the top and the bottom, because what they've done, and this isn't something you see very often, is actually have some fans located in a mini chamber at the bottom. And the idea of this is that you can actually have two separate airflow systems going on at once. So your graphics card is going to be in a vertical GPU mount, and the air is going to go up and out for the GPU. But as I will demonstrate by removing this non-captive thumb screw. Now, boys. Pass the drop test. Anyway, forget continuity. What I was trying to say, and I kept stuffing it up, is that you actually have two separate different bits of ventilation, because if you put fans here and then you use this pre-populated one or replace it with one of your own, essentially your CPU can breathe this way and then your graphics card can breathe up and out. Obviously, I know it's not technically like that, but generally speaking, that is going to be how it works, which I think gets around two main problems. Firstly, the fact that the GPU mount normally sort of sucks because it's not sucking in much air because there's glass in the way. But then also, if you want to use your CPU fan as an intake, that can often cock up the airflow for your graphics card because it's bringing it in a load of heat. First bit of feedback on this case though would be that they should have larger thumb screws, because this is a little bit annoying, and the fact that they can be removed is also a bit of a naff situation. The panels come off and they're actually quite soft, but this does look like a dust filter, but it doesn't seem like it's particularly easy to remove, as if maybe it's glued on somehow. The top should just pop off to lunch, like so. Again, more of the same. I don't know why it's not more easily removable. That reveals a radiator mount at the top, like so. So it's slightly recessed, so it will actually sit in there, which is quite nice. And then as we move to the other side, you'll notice that you have all of your mounting hardware and things in this little box. Drives go at the back, and then you have a load of extra room for extra boxes or just general cable management. The I/O seems to have gone walkabouts. I'm being silly. It's nice and easy to access. It's down here at the bottom, which is great because if you want to actually do any cable management, then you can obviously whack your cable underneath and snake it through. Nice touch. Taking a closer look at the inside, here you've got some protective foam for this default PCIe riser cable. Obviously you don't need to use it, but as you get it as standard and it's sort of built for this sort of airflow, I think it would be silly not to use it unless you had problems. You've got 3 fans installed in this by default, 1 at the rear and then 2 underneath. I don't actually know how you access these, but I'd imagine it is from the underside, but this bottom piece easily comes off and then reveals the 2 fans at the bottom. And we will be leaving these, but obviously if you want to swap these out, great. Just be aware, if you want your build to look ultra pretty, then you're not going to be able to see all of your RGB fans in full glory, because you've obviously got this grill at the bottom to protect it from cables and just give you a bit more continuity. Oh, and boring PC Centric mode. I love the fact that they've added these little labels at the back. I don't know what it is, but something about it just makes this case a little bit nicer. It makes it seem more friendly. Look, it says storage for your storage, expansion, graphics. In the grand scheme of things, obviously it is pretty pointless, but I think it's just like a bit of a nice hug, bit of fresh air. I approve. But of course, in order to actually start building in this, we need to start building in this. And the first thing I'm going to do is grab my Z690 Unify. I haven't used this in a while because, if I'm honest, this is one of these really expensive motherboards that a lot of people don't need. The builds I tend to focus on these days tend to be just like gaming performance orientated, and having such a super high-end board for a lot of people is going to be overkill. Nothing wrong with that if you do want to go down that route, but be advised, having extra PCIe slots and better I/O obviously isn't going to give you a better gaming frame rate. We're going to grab our motherboard, place it down, and then we're going to pick up another item that I don't really use too much on this channel because, again, it's not really worth it, I think, for most PC gamers. This is the 12900K, and unless you're using something like a RTX 3090 Ti, in a lot of games you're not actually going to notice any real difference, especially if you're playing at 1440p or higher. I would go for the i7 if it was up to me. But we'll install our 12900K, just like so. We are also going to go for DDR5 because this is a DDR5 compatible motherboard, and I do think that, especially with the next generation of CPUs and of course the next generation of GPUs, it is going to come into its own very, very shortly. But even then, it's going to be in select titles first, and then it will improve over time. So if you are looking to buy a new system, I would probably stick with DDR4 if you've already got it, but if you're buying like a whole new one and you don't mind spending more money, obviously DDR5 is not a bad way to go, especially now AM5 is certainly here. If you do want to catch all of the AM5 builds that I will be doing, by the way, and those are coming very, very soon, make sure you get subscribed because you're not going to want to miss them. I also realized at this point I didn't tell you what RAM we were actually using other than the fact that it was DDR5. This is from G.Skill as their Trident Z5 RAM. This is the silver SKU, but you can get one in black that I think would match this build slightly better, but obviously it is entirely up to you. We'll take off this very large heatsink. Oh, that's where it is. That's where it is. I was looking for that. It's the 980 Pro. I blame Gareth. He took this build apart probably. Gareth, if you're going to steal an SSD off me, at least like actually take it. Don't just leave it in here. And instead, we'll add our KC3000. This is a 2 terabyte drive from Kingston, PCI Generation 4, super fast. And I love the fact that this motherboard actually has a double-sided heatsink and one of these SSD quick release jobbies, so it's very easy to install. Well, that's all the little bits out of the way. Now we can actually start using this case, and we'll see if it is as good as people have been making out. And I think the first thing to do is to remove the PCIe riser cable from its little cradle. Looks like a couple of screws. We can then grab our motherboard and drop this in. I'm doing this so you can see it, but I would always do this down flat. In fact, oh, I will do that. How to damage your motherboard with PC Centric. Get subscribed for more hot tips. Okay, first problem, that's not really a problem, at least at the moment, is not that I've lost my screwdriver. Linus, if you're watching this, do send me one of your new ones and I will review it. I mean, it looks as if I need a new one. Where's it gone? Oh, I never actually had it. That would explain it. As I was saying, the issue is that the motherboard is quite big and bulky, and there's a little bit of a clearance issue trying to slide it into place. But I think once we remove this fan, we should be able to get our motherboard in, and then hopefully I can place it back. We can remove our storage bay that has all of our cables and things in. And you get a little headphone combo adapter for analog headsets, cable ties, and then all of your screws. Are they labeled to tell you what they do? Yes, they do. For PSU, for motherboard and SSD, for hard drives. This is how you do it, companies. Take note. Oh. Let's remove this stock fan. We're not going to be using that, but we are going to be screwing this motherboard properly down. It's definitely quite Lian Li inspired, but I just think the shape is just that little bit more interesting. And once you do take into account all of that extra airflow, I really am starting to see why people have been talking about this. That's everything screwed in. Now we can unclip our riser cable that I believe is Gen 4. Not going to be ideal if you're going for Gen 5, but that is always going to be the way with new tech. Also like that it's red, it matches the rest of the case. And when we come to use our power supply, we're going to be using some fancy red cables to really tie this thing together. As for the cables that you get with this, it's going to be a pretty standard affair. All for the front I/O, you've got USB 3.1 A's and then 3.1 Gen 2. And then obviously the 2 or 3 fans, depending on which ones you want to use. I'm not going to change the bottom ones, but obviously you can if you want. The front panel, by the way, has one of these lovely front panel connections rather than individual pins, which is something I always love to see. Sure enough, it is a little bit fiddly to plug things in now, so maybe you should have plugged the riser in after plugging these items in. Not impossible though. And now we can move on to our fans and cooling, and this is going to be a bit unrealistic. It's just because I want to make this thing look incredible. So we've got some QL fans that we're going to use as the actual fans. And the cooler that we're using here today is from Corsair. It's the H100i Elite LCD. It's called LCD because you've got a screen on it. You can use this to show like real-time statistics or just put silly GIFs or things on it. It does make your system look a little bit more high-end, but you do have to pay through the nose really for something like this. But in terms of cooling potential, this is a 240 rad, so if you can fit a 360 like you can here, might be worth doing. But if you do want to go on this side, you'll be able to max out at 280, so not 360, 360 only for the top. But we're going to set these up as an intake so the air will come in and then be exhausted here at the back. This should then slide in here at the front. I think you can take this glass out if you want to as well. Yes, it will unscrew, but I'm not sure you need to. As you can see, it is easy enough to screw in, not a problem. Definitely one of the easier radiators I've mounted. If you're doing it at the top, it could be a different story, but I don't see any reason why it would. You do actually have a quick release bracket, so you can do this externally and then drop it in, which is always a little bit easier. I should have actually done this before, but I now need to mount the back plate onto the motherboard, and these storage bays are in the way. These can be used for SSDs or traditional hard drives, but you're going to need your bracket for the cooler, and just to drop that on the back. Because I've used this cooler before, you will be needing some thermal paste on the CPU. Then you can grab the pump, just gently lay it over the top. I think there is a firmware update, so you can actually use this with the tubes in a slightly different orientation, but just to be safe, I'm going to use this in the way they recommend in the manual, which upsets people, but I mean, it does say it in the manual. Now we need to add the rest of the fans. I think you can fit a 120 at the back, but not a 140, which is a little bit of a shame. They probably could have found a little bit of extra room, but it would have made it even thicker. But in a lot of cases, haha, that's no bad thing. So we'll do one back as an exhaust, and then two 140s at the top, also as an exhaust. This is what I was talking about, by the way, when it comes to the fan or radiator bracket. The fan's just literally sitting here. Everything is starting to get a little bit messy now, unfortunately. Let's see if this case can handle it. Then all of the fans should connect to this fan controller. So all of the QLs, both the RGB and the fan speed, connect to one little box. I hope I'm going to have enough room to actually park this. What I might be able to do is actually get it in one of these hard drive cages. I can do the grand reveal for you. Look, I've sandwiched it between the two. So it just needs a little bit of neatening up, but I think that will work quite nicely actually. With the magic of one cable tie, you can make it look like this, so you're still a bit of a mess. But the beauty of this case is that from the front, I don't think you'd ever know. But don't go raising your glasses too soon, because of course we don't have the bulk of the cables that will come from the power supply. We're using the brand new HX1000i from Corsair. 850 or 1000 is probably going to be the sweet spot for high-end builds these days. But this one is platinum rated, which will actually start to save you a fair bit of money on your bills these days. It's got a very weird, very farmyard smell to it. But smell aside, it does have something I've never seen before from a power supply, which is actually this USB-C port, because you can use this to connect it to your computer USB, and then you can monitor everything that's going on, which could be useful if you're a little bit of a tweaker. But let's plug all of the cables that we'll be needing in first, and we are going red to complete the theme. If I'm honest, these aren't actually my favorite cables. I prefer the ones that you get from Cable Mod, but these are potentially better value depending on which cables you want. I mean, things like the SATA isn't necessary at all. But I've never been a fan of like this electrical tape that you get halfway through the cable. Don't like it. Oh, it is definitely starting to get a bit more messy now, and not in a good Leonel way. I'm talking in an awkward way. Ugh, a bit like my comedy. Ugh. We'll turn it round so you can see what's going on, and hopefully these cables at the top will plug in fairly easily actually. But you can at least plug the cables in quite easily, which is not always the case. It's usually the bane of my existence. Cable management semi-complete. We can now move on to the graphics card, and I'm not sure I've used this exact one yet. This is the 6800 XT from XFX. I've used the 6900 XT, it's one of their Merc cards. These things are big, and I'm thinking this is gonna properly populate the bottom of this, look awesome, and as it is a red themed build, it makes sense to go for, you guessed it, Team Red. I forgot just how big this GPU is. I mean, it's actually a little bit plainer in a way because it's not exactly shouting at you. This isn't one of those old-fashioned Gaming X MSI cards that are very red and in your face. It's just quite a lot of cooling, which is of course going to give us lower temperatures, which is grand. And then this should just gently line up with the back. In you go. Boom, we're in. How about that? How about that? I am already very impressed. Look at this. I needed to see it from the front. It is very rare that I do a build that actually looks this good and you haven't even finished it, let alone turn it on. Excited. I'll tell you what, man, I really can't wait to start doing all of these AM5 and Z790, RTX 4080, etc. builds. I've got the itch and it needs scratching. And I think, oh, just like that, we are pretty much done. The only other thing I was going to do, and still might, is to actually use some of these. So these are from Corsair. They're like additional lighting strips that can make your computer look a little bit cooler. So they do indeed clip together magnetically like this. You can make them into some pretty cool shapes and things, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's just gonna ruin the look of this build. So I'm not gonna add any in, which hopefully brings us towards the end of the build sequence. In terms of very minimal cable management, this is what we've got. So I don't think that's too shabby at all. If you do a better job than me, which is not really doing any deliberately to show you what it would look like, I think you're not going to have a big problem getting this looking nice. Just be careful with this sort of area at the top, especially all of these visible cables, because getting it looking perfect is going to be a lot more tricky than just getting it to look acceptable. To see if it works, we will of course hook this up to our 4K monitor. Keyboard, mouse, let's do this. If I can find the power button down here. Let's try that again. Oh no, oh, the delay. How does that look? No RGB on the fans just yet. But are we gonna work? Are we gonna work? Yes, we are! We did it! And now we can actually start to properly talk about this system. And I have to say, in terms of cases I've used over the last year or so, this does stand out to be, I'm reluctant to say the best one because there's a lot more testing to do, but definitely the one that does stand out the most. It looks absolutely incredible. It's a lot more of a show sort of piece build than a lot of other chassis on the market. And obviously you are going to be paying for this. It's not a cheap chassis by any stretch of the imagination. It's not the most expensive, but it's certainly going to cost you a pretty penny. I just love how they've blended form and function though, because so often do you see lovely tempered glass chassis, but they've just got such pants airflow. If you want to do a high-end build, it just doesn't make sense. But by actually allowing you to have that proper ventilation system through without having something that is gigantic inside, I think is very, very clever. I'm excited to actually start testing the thermals on this. Should we get playing some games? And ladies and gentlemen, here we are, all set up and ready to go. Ready to get gaming. I mean, normally I would just jump in and start gaming, but I mean, look at it. Look at it. Ah! The game you're seeing now, I'm sure you've definitely heard of before. This is Call of Duty Warzone running at 4K max settings with ray tracing disabled. And as we touch down on the ground, you can see that our frame rate is pretty much anywhere really between 100 and 120 FPS, which again, 4K pretty much max settings is not too shabby whatsoever. And it's all over. Are my skills up to the task? Are my skills up to the task? Can he do it? No speakers, no audio, and the answer is also no. But in my defense, I'm just not very good. Do you like my custom IQ settings, by the way? We've gone for like a red theme, a little bit of white, just to make it a bit more dynamic. But because you can download and put GIFs on the cooler, I've gone for a little Sebastian Vettel F1 meme, because I'm a cool guy. I do need to put the side panel on this so you can see temperatures properly though. But I will say for the time being that the system has actually been very cool and quiet. You do need to do a little bit of tuning, as this cooler was a little bit noisy out of the box. But once you've done that, you can get your peel on. Why don't they put this on the other side of the thing? Would make more sense, wouldn't it? Boom. I think there is no doubt about it that this is the single best looking system I've built this year. I think it's probably in tied first place over the last couple of years. This and then the AMD build I did. That was in the Corsair 5000X, I believe, so very similar but more of a traditional form factor rather than something a little bit different. But I think this is definitely going to be the party piece, and obviously you can customize it as much as you want in software to really get the look that you want. Let's show you a little bit more gameplay though. Let's jump into Halo Infinite. And exactly the same story here. 4K, max settings, or ultra, if you're one of the cool kids. We're getting around about 70 FPS, so not quite as high, but this is one of those titles that has dynamic resolution, so you can actually turn it down a little bit and you can cap it to say 120 FPS. This is actually what I did when I was playing this game earlier in the year. Believe it or not, it was with a controller downstairs. It was a bit more casual, it's mainly the campaign, and I just capped it to a constant 120. I love games that can do that. Oh, look at me go, look at me go. I am fulfilling the objective. It is a lot easier with a controller. Whoops. No, I didn't say that. The other one. It's a lot easier with mouse and keyboard. No! Let's move on. One more game, and this one is a ray trace title. This is Far Cry 6. This is actually an AMD optimized title. This is running FSR at quality, but everything else is set to max. So we've got some super high ray tracing on this. I think it is one of the best looking titles you can get at the moment. And even though it's sort of faux 4K, we're still getting 100 FPS. So this would be a brilliant way to play if you do want to play Far Cry 6. I started it, I didn't finish it, story of my life. Oh, and this is one of those games that also takes over your Corsair computer as well. So when something happens, the PC should react. Yes, look at that. Isn't that cool? But there we are, our Hyte Y60 gaming PC. And I have to say, I am genuinely very impressed with it. Looking back at the thermals, it is a little bit of a mixed story because while they're absolutely fine on the CPU, we were getting around about 80 on the GPU. But don't read into that too much because the whole system was very quiet throughout. It never felt like I was having a whirring noise sitting next to me, which I literally was. So it's very good. The GPU has just been tuned, I guess, to run at 80 degrees and not run the fans particularly loud. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Are you going to be getting one of these? Have you been considering it? Or would you prefer something a little bit more normal or something maybe smaller like ITX? I'd love to hear from you. And of course, as always, if you do want to learn a little bit more about any of the components in this PC, including current pricing, you can find that linked in the description down below. But smash that like button, get yourself subscribed, and I'll leave you with a short word from this video's sponsor. Before you go, why not check out Squarespace? Squarespace lets you create a beautiful, professional website in minutes, but without an ounce of coding knowledge required. Connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated members-only content, manage your members, send email communications and leverage audience insights, all on one easy-to-use platform. You can also create a community on your Squarespace website, with a fully integrated commenting system and powerful blogging tools to categorize, share, and schedule your posts. You can now even use third-party tools thanks to Squarespace extensions, which help you to manage inventory, promote products, streamline bookkeeping, and even display social media posts automatically. Getting started is incredibly easy. Go to squarespace.com/PC Centric and you can get 10% off your first website or your first domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video.